Many events throughout history have led to various breakthroughs, but do you know which events have led to present-day rights and collective battle for gender equality? In the 19th and 20th century, American women were impacted by an imbalance of rights based on gender. Various figures have fought against these imbalances using multiple strategies in order to achieve labor equality, social and economic equality, and a change in gender stereotypes. In order to solve these problems, women collectively created organizations led empowering public rallies and protests, and lobbied for rights, all to fight for what wasn't given to them because of their gender. Learning about these events showcases women's history and the impact made throughout history by the important female figures. In the 19th and 20th century, women struggled with both labor and political inequality. In the Gilded Age, the role of women was to raise extra money for their families. Women working specifically at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory had to deal with horrendous working environments because they needed a job, since most of them were immigrants and needed the money to get by. They worked about 12 hours a day but were only paid the bare minimum of $15 a week. The working environment was a hazard as there was cotton lying everywhere and women were to work in small, cramped rows, not having much space all day. The International Ladies Garment Workers Union was made to be able to help these women get better working conditions and a better raise. The International Ladies Garment Workers Union was able to lower the amount of hours women have to work, and also were able to develop health and unemployment insurance for their members. The women's suffrage movement held a great impact in the raise of attention for the need of rights and equality for women. In 1848, the first Women's Rights Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York, which was used for the fight for their social, religious, and civil rights. The goal of the convention, as said by Elizabeth Cady Stanton,
to protest against a form of government existing without the consent of the governed, to declare our right to be free as man is free, to be represented in the government which we are taxed to support, to have such disgraceful laws as give man the power to chastise and imprison his wife, to take the wages which she earns, the property for which she inherits, and in case of separation, the children of her love.
There were 11 resolutions for women's rights discussed during the convention, all of which passed, except for the right for women to vote. A manifesto was also written during the convention named the Declaration of Sentiments, which described the need for women's equality and was based on the Declaration of Independence. Afterwards, leaders of the convention continued to fight for women's rights at both state and nationwide events such as protests or parades. During the Progressive Era, women also fought for political rights as well as against dehumanizing gender stereotypes. Specific figures such as Jane Addams and Susan B. Anthony are figures who dedicated their life towards solving these problems, and in doing so, they proved that women shouldn't be held down to a low stereotype and that they deserve political rights. Jane Addams was a social reformer and activist that challenged the stereotypes during the time and achieved high positions of power. Addams was able to climb her way to the political ladder and prove that men weren't the only ones deserving of such titles. Though she has a list of achievements and huge impact she had on women's rights, including lobbying for the establishment of juvenile court system, better urban sanitation and factory laws, protective labor legislation for women, and more playgrounds and kindergartens throughout Chicago, which all led to her goals of creating a better world and giving rights to women. She achieved these things using many strategies, such as leading public campaigns, promoting various reforms using her voice and platform, and joining or creating organizations. For example, Addams participated in the women's suffrage movement as an officer in the National American Women's Suffrage Association and pro-suffrage columnist, as well as serving as president for the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in 1919, which allowed her to constantly fight for women in need.
What influential women figures do you think made a genuine impact during the Progressive Era?
Among the many women who have made an impact during this time, I am well informed of the many achievements achieved by American activist Jane Addams. Though she had many important roles, Jane Addams also served as president of the National Conference of Charities and Corrections from 1909 through 1950. She was the first woman to hold that specific title, but most importantly, she also became active in the women's suffrage movement as an officer in the National American Women's Suffrage Association, on top of becoming a pro-suffrage columnist.
Margaret Sanger is another important female figure who fought for feminine health rights and education using various strategies. During this time, there were very few informative sources to information about contraception and sexual health. Margaret Sanger directly stated,
"The idea of the social and racial value of knowledge to prevent conception is new in the United States, and therefore it has been difficult to get first-hand facts and comprehensive statistics with the local bearing.
It was an obvious fact that birth control wasn't given the attention needed, and Sanger explained,
I found that every department of life was open to investigation and discussion except the shaded value of sex."
These words, combined with various other facts during this time, proved how contraception and sexual health were taboo topics, especially in relation to educating women, especially of the working class, about these topics. This combination of toxic morals, philosophies, and laws led American activist Margaret Sanger to work towards solving these problems and giving women the naturally deserved right to education and resources for their bodies. This drove Margaret Sanger to open up her own clinic in order to help relieve the pressure of these present-day restrictions to what should naturally be given. Her clinic provided resources and education to women in need. However, Sanger didn't stop there. Using her voice and experience as a mother and child, Sanger took her ideas to court and fought for feminine health rights and education. She used her past experiences to provide why birth control and sex education was needed for women. Sanger stated,
I found that the women in the working class had empathetic views on the crime of bringing children into the world to die of hunger.
These words, combined with many other speeches and writings, allowed Margaret Sanger to sway others and gain a following. Her work laid the foundation for what birth control and sex education should look like, accessible to all and readily available. She left a legacy which built and grew communities, which worked towards her dream of developing effective birth control methods and ensuring they were widely available to women of all backgrounds. The same activists who were fighting for women's rights were also fighting for women being able to vote. This battle lasted about 50 years, starting with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, and many participants in 1848 during the inaugural Women's Rights Convention. The result of this convention was that most things women asked for were passed, except for the right to vote. Thus, women began to fight for it in acts of resistance such as hunger strikes. These acts were made these women beyond brave and powerful. In 1872, many women, including Susan B. Anthony, voted illegally in an election in Rochester, New York. Though Anthony was fined, the act of resistance was more important. In addition, black women faced separate discrimination, which caused them to make additional black women's suffrage group in 1896. They were created by multiple women such as Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells, Frances E. W. Harper, Mary Church Terrell, who went on to advocate for receiving equal pay, education, training, and more. As many were still fighting, Alice Paul joined in and led a protest outside the White House to get President Wilson to support their movement. However, this led to the arrest of peacefully protesting women.
The vote is the emblem of your equality. Women of America, the guarantee of your liberty. Women have suffered agony of soul which you can never comprehend, that you and your daughters might inherit political freedom. The vote has been costly, private. The vote is a power, a weapon of offense and defense, a prayer. Understand what it means and what it can do for your country. Use it intelligently, conscientiously, prayerfully. Progress is calling you to make no pause. Act.
In 1919, the House got closer to passing the 19th Amendment, and in August 1920, the final vote from Tennessee was counted, allowing it to be officially ratified. By November, more than 8 million women, including white and black women, voted in their first presidential election. This was an amazing advancement, but Native American, Hispanic, and Asian women were still not allowed to vote. In 1952, the McCarran-Walter Act allowed specifically only for Asian citizens to have the right to vote, which included women. In 1965, the Historical Voting Rights Act was passed, thus finally allowing for people of color to vote as long as they were citizens. The movements created by women included riots, speeches, and protests gave the women the opportunity to continue fighting and standing for what they believe in to this day. The argument for abortion has two sides with different reasoning. One side calls themselves pro-life and says it's murder, while the other calls themselves pro-choice and says it's a right. In most of these cases, abortion ties in with religion and morals. Pro-lifers believe abortion is killing off an innocent child, while those who are pro-choice believe that women's body and mindset come first as the fetus hasn't been born yet. For a very long time, and in some countries still today, Honduras, El Salvador, and etc. consider abortion to be illegal, while in America, states such as Arizona, Alabama, etc. also say abortion is illegal. In October 2020, Poland had a court ruling where abortion was banned. This made activists angry due to a strict law and handled the situation by protesting on the streets. Red flags, red smokes, and signs flooded the streets. Leaders of the women's strike movement joined in alongside with many other supporters. After several days of protesting to change the law, Poland had issued a new law where abortion was legal and allowed under the circumstances of rape, incest, and if the life of the mother is in danger. Women have bravely put their lives in risk to gain equal freedom, though many times things have changed and women over time were receiving more freedom as they fought. There are still some issues today, yet the community to support women has grown much more than it was before.